thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, he shall not live in the presence of our relatives. See for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods.
Okay.
That's it.
That was it. That was the end of 32. And so last time we were together, we're looking. I introduced this last week as what I view as a hinge in Jacob's life, because I'm interpreting it and I'm looking at this as there is something changed in this man's life. You know, we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of looking at this man's life, and his actions are pretty consistent and pretty predictable. I find it astounding that now, in the context of this, really this dialogue with his father-in-law, and right after the words of Laban to him, basically shaming him, he comes out with this phrase, because I was afraid. I mean, I look at that as total transparency, a total disarmament, not expecting this at all from this man. I would expect Jacob to respond in a defensive posture, using his ability to communicate and convince, but it's like he's bearing his heart and bearing his soul. And I find that astounding, very interesting, and that's what we're looking at here. And I'm going to try to give language to what I think is happening. So, by way of review, we're looking at the key phrase, because I was afraid. We've looked at this box, and we're going to continue with this idea this morning that life happens within a box. And in our box, there are opportunities that occur. Can you see that? Opportunities. And then, generally speaking, all kinds of opportunities. But those opportunities that create a sense of conflict or threat to our being, the general mode of operation, especially for us men, is control. We clamp. And if we start looking back at the times we've clamped in our lives, a lot of times there's reasons that we're going to get to in just a minute. But control is a big thing with us. Then in our box, the next movement, once we control, we tend then to rationalize our we've got to reconcile our decision. So we rationalize it. And that moves us to a lifestyle of this illusion of control, that I'm in control and I'm in charge of my life. And then that just takes us right back to more opportunities. So it's more of the same. And so what I'm suggesting is that life happens within this box, and this box is called the realm of the known. In this box also, there's, the little eyeballs here represent the idea of looking out here outside, that because we're in the image of God, there's a pull outside. There's a pull, there's a vision, there's adventure, there's something out there that's unknown that pulls us, wants to pull us outside the box. But when the opportunity comes, what happens most of the time, unless something new happens, we tend to clamp. We tend to control. We say we want adventure, but when it comes right down to it, we really don't want adventure because something else grips us. And that's what we're going to be looking at. So, Jacob, facts about Jacob. He has desired, right here, I'm going to mark this. He's desired greater things in his life. We've seen that time and time again. He was the guy that wanted the birthright. He was the guy that wanted worked with his mom to strategize how he could steal his brother's blessing of the firstborn, the birthright blessing. And so we've seen him that he desires the right things. However, what's true about Jacob and is true of me is that I have tended in my life to use my own resources to go after those things. Right here. Used his own resources to get what he wants. Let's just get her done. And I think all of us probably have stories about how we have done that. We want the right things, but we tend to want to go out and grasp those things in our own power and own strength.
Is there something wrong with that?
Well, no, actually, that is a really great question. I'm going to look at that on the next slide because I think it's necessary.
In our society, it's just called initiative.
Yeah. Yeah, we go get her done. Well, I think it's natural and I think it's necessary. But it's not the whole picture. It's to lead us to something else. And then Jacob has reached what I call limitation. He has now, in my mind, come up against something that is greater than him, and he can't. He's come to a wall. And rather than continue to fight and to continue to try to beat his way through, what I see as significant about this moment is that he is now pulling back and just saying enough is enough. He has reached his limitation. He has had opportunity to reach limitation, his point of enough many times. But it's significant that now is the time. Now is the time that it's happening. And I'd like to suggest that I think every man needs to come to this point of limitation, where he comes to this point of realizing that I just can't do this. And I don't think it's a one-time thing. I think there is a first time. But I think it's a time after time realization, and the language that Jesus uses. We're going to look at that in just a little bit in the Gospels. So this is what limitation, and this ties into what you were just saying. Is that in our culture, you said it's just natural, because in our culture, and I think just in the human psyche, is that it's ingrained within us this value of what I'm using the word assent. We, especially as a young man, we're concerned about, my education and my role in life, my mission, my purpose, who I'm going to go through life with, what I can acquire and what I can accomplish, what I can attain to. And these things are natural. These things are normal. And it's very much in sync with how our culture is really good at supporting this ideal. It's all about where are you going to go to school and what are you going to be? What are you going to be when you grow up? And that's the language we use. And it's not bad. It's natural. And I think our culture supports this very well. Well, I'm proposing to you that is not what it's all about. And I think all of us intuitively know this, that it's actually through limitation. Here's the wall. This will take us so far, but there comes a point in a man's life, and I'm using this as an example here in Jacob's life. It's this point where he realizes he's hitting a wall, and this is not what it's all about. There's something else. There's something more, and that something more is what. It's not a term that I've coined, but I've adopted it. It is not the way of ascent, it's the way of descent. And I think, guys, especially as I age, this idea of descent is the story. It's the story of all time. We're reminded of this annually through the changing of the seasons. It is all about death, movement. It's about a new birth, and it's about a life, and it's about a descent into the winter month, the fall and the winter months, and then it's about death. And that death then gives way to a period of silence and lack of movement, to then a birth. We're reminded of it year after year. We look at all of nature around us, and we see life and death and the turmoil of these, or the interaction of these two. Every great story has this element in it, is the one giving themselves over so that others can live. And of course, the prime example is what we see in the message and the life of Jesus through the incarnation, is the one who came, who is God, took upon himself human flesh, was the lowest of the low. Culturally, socially, he positioned himself in the bottom of the structure, not at the top. He took upon him the form of a servant, and he went to the cross willingly, and through that death experience, 3 days later, there was a new birth. And I was dwelling on it this week, and I was thinking, gee, I don't believe, guys, I haven't checked this out, but I can't recall, when we look at the cross of Christ, we look at what he's done, what I'm thinking is we look at that act as a tremendous act of love, which it is, and a sacrificial fulfillment that he made for me so I can go free. I mean, and I believe that. However, in the very words of Jesus, what did he say about it? And I was thinking about it, that number one, Jesus never said to worship me or to feel sorry for me. Do you see where I'm going with that? You know, he never said, feel sorry for me, because I think in some cases we've kind of, oh, he did this for me? Well, yes, and I'm not criticizing that or demeaning that. But what he said was, follow me. Follow me. Follow you? You mean to live your life as the lowest of the low, and in the base, to be a servant, to give your life for others? He said it, to die daily. He's the one who made the correlation between physical death and that act, or what, tying that idea to daily, to die daily. What does that mean? To go to the cross, literally, is what he's calling us as men, as followers of him. Follow me. This is what you're called to do. Well, all of that, guys, is this idea. That's why I say there's only one story, the way of descent. And we see it. We see it all around us, where through the sacrifice, the giving up of one's life for others, in the ultimate act of love, others live on. It's amazing, amazing story. So, having said that, back to our box, taking it to the next level. What keeps us in the box? Well, it's this idea that I've got to maintain control. I've got to be in control of my life, which is part of the way of ascent. I've got to stay on top. We have opportunities every day as we're looking out of the box to the great pull. And how do we get out? Well, I've added a little feature here called the TOF. It's a doorway. It's the doorway out. There's only one doorway out. You know, I think of the terms Jesus said, the road is narrow. It's a tight squeeze out of this box. And I call it the TOF, or the threshold of fear. Because the reason why is because as you and I, we have opportunities come our way, and as we start to move towards the doorway, what wells up within us? It's fear. It's natural fear. Fear of what? Loss of control. And but yet the only way out is across that threshold. And of course, what the message is, what's out there, what pulls us out, you know, we want to be out there, but what has to be enacted is right there. Trust. I believe at this point in Jacob's experience, he is able to lay down his right to defend because something new has happened and trust has taken over. Guys, have you ever had that experience where it is absolutely overwhelming, something that has occurred? Overwhelming. And you're able for the first time to just give it over and say, God, I just can't do this. I just cannot do this. And what happens is an amazing thing occurs within. It's been described as a warm blanket. It's been described as an inner sense of knowing. And nothing can really, nothing's really changed, but yet it's going to be okay. That, guys, is a death experience where I give it over and I lay down the need to control. What's keeping me in the box? Fear. I can't give up. And so here it is. The earlier aspects of life is about acquiring and attaining and building and constructing my life. You know, putting it all in order. The later parts of life, what we're learning about here and what's transitioning at this very moment is not about acquiring, building, constructing, controlling. Conversely, it's about letting go. It's really about letting go. So when you say, well, what about, our culture says, you know, this is normal. Yes, it is, and it's not wrong. But it's only part of the picture. The true picture, the message of the gospel is about having those things, but a release and a surrender. You know, we've all used these words. And when that happens, it transforms you. It just will transform your life. I mean, it's not that things, you know, circumstances can actually get worse. But there is an inner sense of peace and confidence and a love that fills you with an awareness and an understanding that is totally, something has changed. I don't need to control it. It doesn't mean I'm laying down, you know, here's the pushback. Well, does it mean you just lay down in a fetal position? No, that's not what I'm saying. It's in the midst of the turmoil. I don't have to control it. I can give it over. And it's a peace, like the scripture, Paul describes it as the peace that surpasses understanding. Yeah. Yes.
That that peace and the perfect love that casts out fear.
There you go.
When you come to a point,
That is good.
and just recently with Diane being as sick as she was, I was very aware I was not in control.
Yeah.
And when we finally just let go and let God take care of this, knowing that without Him we can do nothing, and we turn it all over to Him, we found that door. You know, it's not that we don't pass back and forth.
Right. We all understand that. Yep.
The fact of the matter is, just like the Lord says, the world thinks all of these things are so important. How about the man that built the barn because he had such a good crop? The Lord told him, this very night your soul will be called for. These things are of so little importance when it comes down to, the fact of life, especially of loved ones. And not that we shouldn't love everyone, but I mean, people that are close to you, when they, their life is called on, it takes a toll with you. And how anybody can do it without the Lord in their life is beyond me.
So, in our example, I'm proposing that something new has occurred. I'm using this box as a way to illustrate it. That for the first time in the story, Jacob has trusted enough to step across that threshold where fear and trust, those two, and trust for the first time allowed him to step over that threshold. Now something's great's going to happen. We're going to go on and build this box idea a little bit later. But what I want us to do now is I'd like to, let me finish out the text. Verse 31 and 31b and then 32. I'm looking at this as what I'm calling mixed response because, Jim, you alluded to it where you said yourself and Diane crossed that threshold. Yes, you did. And you made the disclaimer, well, that doesn't mean we don't go back and forth. That's true. We all understand that. Because it's once you go across, wow, something big happened. It feels good. But that doesn't mean we don't go back. Because it's a new at bat every time, right? And I think as far as Jacob's humanness, he's a man just like you and I. But there's two things that happen in verse 31b and 32. One is he names his fear. And to the degree, men, that you and I are able to name our fear, that takes a lot of courage. It takes humility and it takes courage. But being able to name our fear is everything. Because our tendency is to keep stuffing it, and not facing it. So he names his fear. He says, I was afraid because I thought you would. And I think he had a good case. I mean, I don't think it was a fabrication in his head. I think it's not far from reality. And he was afraid of that. So that's the positive side. But then I look the not so positive side is in this case of transparency, where he's naked in a sense emotionally before his father-in-law. Often, I mean, once you disrobe and feel how great it feels to be transparent and honest, like there's nothing to hide. What is often the case is he just said, okay, you can take it all. It's almost like he became fearless at that moment because he's stepped out of the box. He's overcome fear with trust. And he's able at that very moment to be at such a bold level. He says, whoever has whatever you need, kill him. He spoke too quickly and too rashly. And I certainly understand it. It's not wrong. It's natural for him to say it. Of course, the text says he didn't know. I mean, he says, Come after me. I have nothing to hide. It's basically the way we could interpret this is, I have nothing to hide. Come and take it all. I don't fear you anymore. Look from what he's changed. He states, I am afraid, but then he acts in a fearless manner. Isn't that wild? It's not so wild because that's what happens. Because once you and I bear ourselves at that level and be at that level of transparency, it's like we have nothing else to fear. And he became, at that moment, fearless. And of course, he made a pretty bold statement. So that's at least how I interpret those last two verses. But what I'd like you to do is, where are you? We got about, 12, 13 minutes. And just at your table, or maybe you can join these guys here, but look at the box and let's just go around and identify where you are on that box. Are you at a place of opportunity? Are you at a place of decision? I don't really show it here. I can draw it real quick. I'll use it right here. See, I could draw, you're at a place of this right here, opportunity. Am I going to go to control or am I going to go to the threshold? And of course, that would be a time when there's a struggle going on, control or threshold. Am I in a place, quite honestly, of rationalizing my mode of operation? Could I be in a place of illusion? Or am I just about ready to cross that threshold? Or have I crossed that threshold with trust? And what's occurred as a result? So I'd like you to do that, and I'll jump in here with these guys, and let's just do that I'm going to shut all the recording stuff off. We'll just do that for the rest of the time, and I'll leave the overhead on, and we'll call it good. All right.